Good morning. I see some more people are coming in and joining us. We are at 244 participants. Yes. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm hopeful you all can hear me okay. Well, again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Victoria Romero, and I serve as the co-chair for the CUNY Advising Council. And on behalf of our team, I would like to welcome you all to day 2 of the 2021 CUNY Advising Summit. Now, yesterday was an exciting day filled with a combination of laughter, joy, tears, and encouragement as we listened attentively to our dynamic keynote speaker, Dr. Charlie Nutt of Nakata, and our CUNY colleagues from across various campuses. During this time, we had the opportunity to gain insight on current student research and trends based on the impact of the pandemic. We learned about new technologies and how to leverage existing CUNY platforms, how to increase student engagement, and was reminded of the critical role we play as advisors and how we are at the center, right, of student success. Our team is excited for you to continue to learn, share, and reflect as we partake in today's program. Before we get started, I want to share some friendly reminders and instructions to assist you with navigating the day. So currently, we're in a webinar format. So while you cannot see each other, there are well over, again, 250 plus participants joining us today. This webinar format does have a Q&A tab you'll see at the bottom of your screen. So while all participants will remain on mute in this format, you will have the opportunity to click there to ask questions to our speakers at the end of their presentations. We will remain in this webinar for the plenary session, then you will be dismissed to breakout sessions. There are 4 sessions to select from. Links are accessible via our summit webpage, which can be accessed by using the link that was provided to you all in your confirmation email, or by going to tinyurl.com/advising summit 2021. Again, that link is tinyurl.com/advising summit 2021. Please note some sessions have designated Zoom meeting IDs and passwords, while others don't. Nonetheless, you can simply click on where it says room 1, room 2, room 3, room 4 to access the virtual meeting. And you'll know what I'm talking about once you get to the website. Following the breakout session, we will return to this webinar format for the remainder of the day to hear our final keynote speaker, closing remarks, and review of a video presentation you don't want to miss. Finally, we encourage you to post on social media that you are attending this CUNY Advising Summit, right? By utilizing our hashtag advising in the new normal. So let's get started. I now hand it over to my remarkable co-chair, Dr. Sharon Ricks, who will introduce our plenary speaker. Sharon.
Good morning, and thank you, Vicki. Good morning, everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker this morning, Dr. Adam Johnsick. Dr. Adam Johnsick is a counseling psychologist with a group practice in Manhattan. He currently works in higher education as an adjunct clinical instructor at Fordham University's Graduate School of Education, and has a professional history as an academic advisor, working within CUNY for over 10 years. Dr. Johnsick has done research on, created, and executed student development programs that focus on mindfulness, storytelling, and advocacy for underserved groups. In his current direct clinical work and clinical supervision, his work revolves around storytelling, helping clients and supervisees identify and tell their stories, embrace and foster alternate narratives, and inhabit intention and agency in their current lives and work. I present to you Dr. Adam Johnsick.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Ricks, my friend. I will just get my screen share going here and get started. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and good morning to all. I'm very excited to be here. Again, my name is Adam Johnsick, and I will be speaking with you today about self-care, a concept that is probably at least familiar to most people. There's been a lot of talk about it in the new normal, but I'd like to speak a little bit about some more specifics about how it might be applied to the tasks of academic advising. So I'd like to start by just kind of fleshing out a little bit about myself. Sharon Ricks, thanks so much for that introduction. I've known Dr. Ricks for a long time, and I've been at CUNY really for the beginning of my professional career. I started at Kingsborough Community College when I started my graduate training. As an adjunct academic advisor. I did mostly advisement there, but also a little bit of programming for transfer student programming. I was there for a couple of years, and then I moved to Baruch in 2008, where I was for just under 9 years, and kind of continued developing my professional identity as an academic advisor as I was continuing to train as a counseling psychologist. I really got into research and programming for students, and for particular transfer students, and that became kind of my kind of the way I approached my work in general academically. So I spent a little bit of time at John Jay as a program manager for just about a year, and then I started my clinical practice. Since then, I've been in clinical practice, and I've continued my connection with higher education, something that's been personally very important to me since my childhood. And so at this point, I'm working as a teacher in Fordham's Masters of Mental Health Counseling program. And I also have a group practice that has several offices in Manhattan. We're all working from home right now, but I do clinical supervision and direct clinical work. So I've been working in session format for the duration of this since March 13th, 2020. Just kind of like probably the rest of us here. The type of work I do is a little bit different, but I think I have a kind of unique perspective on self-care as it pertains to academic advisement because of my history. So I think I can really start by saying academic advisement is hard. And it's a simple way of putting it. But the reason why I say that is because there are just so many things that advisors have to keep track of. This was what was always so striking to me. In any curricular advisement session, when you're talking about classes and what students should take and what students should not take, and kind of the simple things that sometimes aren't so simple, that you can talk about so many different things as well. So you can talk about aspects of career counseling, you can get into personal counseling areas, certainly academic remediation, also professional development training, also a lot of, transfer. Should I transfer? Should I not transfer? What are my major, minor options? You can really talk about a lot of things. So I think of academic advisement as kind of like a triage for the entire university, for students to come in and kind of get started with what they need, have a conversation about all the different things that they could need. And then in addition to all those kind of student-facing tasks, we also have back-end tasks. So developing programs, maybe you're teaching in a student development or freshman year experience or transfer experience class. Maybe you're doing orientation programming or designing that. Certainly office management, keeping up on technology maintenance, and your own professional development. All those things together create a really complex and sometimes exhausting constellation of things to keep track of and things to do as an academic advisor. So, insofar as that's the case, self-care is essential, and it's ethical. So, self-care I actually think of academic advisement as kind of a fundamentally kind of social justice endeavor. And the reason why I say that is because so many people who seek academic advisement are the students who are oftentimes first generation college students. They come from families that perhaps don't know how education works in the United States, or don't know how college works because they haven't been there before, or don't have kind of a family ethic that they haven't yet been introduced to. So academic advisors work with students who are coming from a educationally kind of non-privileged position. And I find that to be compelling because helping students get through college is the first step towards making strides towards equality and social justice. So actually, self-care as a concept also has a social justice history. It began in the 1960s as basically a medical concept that was used in preventative medicine for mentally ill and aging populations to try to kind of start to think about being well rather than fixing illness. And then it kind of parlayed into, or kind of took roots in activist movements to increase wellness among populations of urban Black folks in, trying to get medical needs met and other resources, and also women who were trying to, women's liberation movements gaining access to medical care and reproductive rights and things like that. So the idea of kind of separating groups of people from a hierarchy or patriarchy in the medical world was where self-care kind of originated and kind of started to become an ethical concept. And then there was kind of a widening scope for professionals like EMTs, trauma therapists, social workers, and other helping professions to really pay attention to themselves and make sure that they're taking care of themselves first, putting their oxygen mask on first before they try to help other people. And so insofar as that is an ethical and social justice, it has this ethical and social justice history, I would say that it's an ethical imperative to pay attention to self-care. And the Council for the Advancement of Standards in Higher Education would agree. While there's no ethical code specifically for NACADA, I wasn't able to find it. There have been statements made about self-care concepts, like higher ed officers should strive to maintain personal wellness and healthy lifestyles. They should manage personal life so that overall professional effectiveness is maintained, and they should espouse to follow an ethics code. And indeed, from related fields, ethics codes do speak to self-care as an ethical imperative. That it's not just about making sure that advisors are okay. That's good and that's important. That is vital. But it's also about the quality of work. It's about delivering to students in need that are coming for information and coming for engagement and connection, and being able to do that in an effective and optimized way. So with that, what is self-care? I'll start by saying what it's not. It's not just a couple of things that you do that you check off a list and say, well, this wasn't a self-care activity. Okay, I guess I'm doing well now. That's pretty obvious, but it's more of kind of like a way of life. It's a general approach to being that puts wellness first. So it's intentional, it's deliberate. There's kind of a sense that it's an ongoing practice. It's something that you do in kind of a preventive way. It's active, it's not passive. You have to kind of be mindful of it, be thinking about how is my wellness affected here? How is my wellness level affecting how I'm working? It's focused on optimizing functioning. It's very individualized. So everybody is going to have a different constellation of self-care needs, and yours are going to be yours only, and it's going to be important for you to understand. And we'll talk a little bit about different areas that you can try to kind of test out and see if you can become more mindful about through this presentation. It's growth promoting, it's flexible, and it's essentially a group of varied strategies that you can apply in different areas given different circumstances, which given how the world is today versus in February of 2020, for example, flexibility has been key. And so coming up with kind of a self-care plan that is, that's going to work for you and that is flexible and that can be applied in different ways is of utmost importance. So what happens when self-care is kind of ignored or not taken seriously? It can certainly lead to distress, poor judgment. That would be a real problem. Misadvisement is a concrete outcome, and misadvisement can be really detrimental to student wellness. Certainly, I've sat on appeals boards and in different groups that we've looked at misadvisement and had to make rulings on it. It really can be devastating for students. So that's one that we want to be really careful of. Compassion fatigue and exhaustion and burnout and impaired competence, just a general sense that you're not working at a competent level. That's where kind of the ethical charge comes in. So one thing that you want to think about is if you kind of ignore self-care, or if you aren't focused on maintaining wellness, stress is what you feel. And as stress accumulates, it becomes distress. And as distress accumulates, it becomes impairment. So that's kind of the scary outcome that we want to avoid. That's what we're focusing on here. That's part of what we're focusing on. That's one half of what we're focusing on. And what I'd like to do now is take a moment. I have a virtual poll here that is completely anonymous, and I hope that you will be willing to participate. I'd like to just get a snapshot of how everybody is doing in terms of some self-care issues. It's simple. It's just a check. It's a series of check boxes that you can check, and I can display the results. The reason why I want to do this is because I want to kind of take the temperature of the room, as they say, and see kind of where people are. Working over the course of this year, that my supervisees and their clients and my clients and all my colleagues have had all sorts of different responses to kind of working from home to the new normal. And so some people have really liked it. So there have been some real positives for people. Some people have really had difficulties. I'm trying to see if we have an issue with through the Q&A, but the Q&A is not coming up. Let's see. I can't see the Q&A. So let me take a look at the poll and see if responses are coming in. It's loading responses, waiting for responses. Well, let's see if we can get some responses. Maybe I'm still having trouble.
I'm sorry, Adam, we can't click on the link.
Oh, the link doesn't click?
Correct.
Huh.
Oh, here it goes.
I clicked on it, but other people can't. Is that the idea?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, well, this was the checklist. I feel tired more of the time. I feel less healthy. I sit most of the day. I often feel isolated at work. My eyes are tired. It feels like my colleagues are miles away. Work can feel monotonous. My body is sore. I do not care about my work as much as I used to. My conversations with students are more meaningful. My new schedule leaves me more time. I dread Mondays. I work at my own pace. I see my family more often. I eat out or order less order in less. I can switch from one task to another with ease. I have contact with students that's more meaningful. Content of what is spoken about is simpler, and overall work is easier. So those are kind of areas that are relevant to self-care. And I'm sorry that the link is not working, although I'm somehow not surprised with how technology, of course, always works. But I wanted to see if we could get a sense of how people were doing. But insofar as that's not working, we can just go on and say, you could see from those items, some things were kind of obviously negative, but then there's also another side of the coin, and that we want to think about not just, kind of remediating stress or alleviating distress or making sure we're not impaired, but also more importantly, surviving, first of all, and then flourishing, doing things to actually kind of create a sense of wellness, a sense of kind of satisfaction, and a sense of ease in the world. So to do this, there's this wonderful book actually that was created in 2018. That was authored in 2018 by Norcross and Vandenbos, and that it's for psychologists, and it comes from a place of applying self-care to clinical work for psychologists. But what I wanted to do through presenting this is kind of call out a subset of the 13 areas that they identified as kind of self-care areas, and to talk about ones that I think are kind of most, in my experience, in my kind of estimation, most relevant for academic advisement. So there are 8 of them. The first one is to be mindful. The second one is to recognize hazards, mind the body, set boundaries, sustain healthy escapes, create a flourishing environment, foster creativity and growth, nurture relationships. So let's start with being mindful. Mindfulness is essentially becoming aware. One of the things I wanted to do with the survey is to kind of get a snapshot and thus become aware of what are the things that people are experiencing. So individually for you, it's a process of being observant of what you're experiencing and what you can kind of make interventions on behalf of yourself and behalf of your self-care in your life. The observing is the first step to clarifying what it is that you need. Mindfulness very much so as a practice. It's very, very popular right now. You can find apps for it that are free. You can find paid apps that are really, really rich. There are commercial products, there are books, there are groups. I thought about doing a mindfulness meditation, but I felt like doing that over Zoom and was a little bit much. But like integrating a breathing practice into your daily routine, if not more than once daily, if not like between sessions, for example, could be really, really helpful. So it's being mindful. That's kind of the first step. That's the umbrella to becoming aware of what your self-care needs are, recognizing the hazards. In any environment, there are going to be work and organizational politics. There's going to be who got this promotion, who got that promotion, what's going on with these resources. That can be very stressful. For example, feelings of isolation, extra professional stressors like taking care of kids at home. That's something, or animals. My dog will probably start barking here at some point, and I'll have to deal with that maybe. That's something that we're all kind of having to take into account when we're thinking about our stress levels. Excessive feelings of responsibility. That's something that for academic advisors, I think is really, really common because academic advisors care so much. And it's so hard to let responsibility lie with the students in appropriate ways. It's easy to kind of be overwhelmed with trying to help people, especially now that things are so clearly changed and the landscape is even more difficult for students. So emotional strain, compassion fatigue, political and sociocultural and economic stress of students, more so than ever with what's going on in police spheres and in women's rights spheres in this country and all over the world. Being a young student, especially student of color, especially of different types of populations, it can be extremely stressful, and that can kind of come into your advisement sessions very easily. And then obviously boredom or monotony of work, that can always come, but I think especially working over Zoom, it's a little bit more common. The third concept is to mind the body. That's pretty simple. Everybody kind of knows that, we should be exercising, we should be getting out, we should be, getting some cardiovascular, I'm not really talking about that specifically. I'm talking about becoming aware of your body as your kind of as part of the instrument of doing academic advisement, that getting a walk around the block, getting the blood pumping, not so that you can be physically fit per se, but so that you can get a break, and so that you can change a perspective. It can be really, really important. Certainly nutrition. People have struggled so much over the course of the pandemic to eat healthily, oftentimes to be in a routine where they're getting the nutrition that they need, and also getting nutrition kind of regularly in a way that's going to feel healthy is sometimes a difficult thing to do, especially if boundaries are not set well. We'll talk about boundaries in a second. Sleep, very important. Obviously, sex is another thing that if I were in more of a psychotherapeutic realm, I might talk a little bit more about, but I think I'll leave that one there. It should be on there, but you can use your imagination or not. And then posture. That's something that is part of the Zoom world. We're not sitting in ergonomic office chairs anymore. Oftentimes we're doing advisement or doing our work from, couches, or sometimes from our bedrooms, from different areas. So think of being mindful of your body posture. And then earphone fatigue and eyes and screen time. Those are especially relevant right now. And it's not lost on me that this is kind of yet another series of Zoom sessions to talk about this. But I do, being aware of how much time you're spending on the screen and how much time the earphones are in can really be important. The next one is setting boundaries. That's basically knowing your lines. And I think this is also difficult because of what I spoke about at the beginning. There are so many different areas of need for students. There are constant, kind of shifts in advisement sessions, and knowing kind of what you're intending to talk about and bringing things to a place where you're not feeling overwhelmed can be really important, and setting boundaries can help with that. So some recommendations would be to start and stop work at the time that you intend to. That's also something that's hard to do. Do what you can and say no to what you can't. That it seems simple, but kind of being mindful of and becoming aware of kind of what your capabilities are and what you're just going to be toiling with because you don't have training in, or because you're not qualified to do. That's a really important set of skills to be able to say that you have. You might think about setting a number of contacts that feel comfortable, maybe the number per day, the number of per unit of time. I know that in my clinical practice, the number of people I see per day has changed over the course of the pandemic, and the number of people I see back to back has changed. So I used to kind of ethically and energy-wise be able to see between 8 and 10 a day for 45-minute sessions, and that has reduced, and that's been something that I've had to be mindful of. And really adjust to. I think it's the same thing with academic advisement, and that some of the kind of information that I've received just from kind of informal conversations is that the frequency of need, or the number of student contacts has actually gone down. And I wonder if people would be interested in sharing what their experience has been as an academic advisor. You could maybe put it in the question and answer. I'm not sure if that'll work or not. But just to think about kind of what that change in number of people that you're seeing does to you, and how that changes the conversation and changes the academic advisement experience. Finally, staying on topic in terms of boundaries. It can be really exhausting for academic advisement sessions to wander into areas that, again, maybe you're not so familiar with, or you're not prepared to deal with. This is a balance, because as Dr. Nutt said in the keynote talk yesterday, we want to be people first, and we want to let them go where they need to go. But there's a balance, and making sure that you're staying within the balance of your capabilities and your wellness is really important. Sustain healthy escapes. That is simple. Take breaks, take vacation, talk to your friends about non-work issues. I even talk to your colleagues about non-work issues. I would imagine some of your friends are your colleagues. Go walk around the block, change your scenery. Changing your scenery can be absolutely central. If you start the day in one room and you're able to, you have the capability of going to a different room for the end of the day, that could be really useful for you. And again, none of these are prescriptive. You're thinking to yourself, does that make sense for me? Is this something that I'm experiencing? What's going to help me? And then you practice it and you experiment with it, and you try different things so that you can increase your wellness and kind of create a flourishing self-care plan. Now, these are my little icons. There they are. The next one is create a flourishing environment. What does that mean? That's also actually pretty simple. Knowing what temperature you need, knowing what posture, how are you sitting, how long have you been looking at your screen, dressing the part, creating the environment that makes you feel comfortable and efficacious. It feels like wagging the dog a little bit, but it makes a big difference. It makes a big, big difference. So kind of being aware of what's around you. It's not, it's not just you and the computer. It's not just you and the student. It's also, is your window open? Do you need fresh air? Would it help to try to do an advisement session in a different room? This kind of thing. And you can also see, as I'm talking about these things, they overlap. So they're not just kind of discrete things, discrete interventions that you can make. They are related to each other. And then finally, foster creativity and growth. This one I find to be especially important, because this is one of the things I really loved about, especially working at Kingsborough and at Baruch. I had managers that would really help to foster my creativity through program development, through different types of opportunities to interact with students in different ways that would leverage other areas of my life, like my counseling psychology training. This is when we did programs in storytelling for transfer students and for undocumented students that were kind of related to academic advisement, but also in some ways very different and creative. It helped me stay connected to something else that was also meaningful to me, and that really helped me get to work some days. When on any given day I might have seen 25 or more, sometimes, especially during registration, advisement appointments, that could really get difficult. It could get grating, and having something else to think about and something else to be creative about was really helpful. And also remembering to play. Play is something that we oftentimes don't associate with work. In fact, we think of it as the opposite. But having a playful relationship with colleagues and kind of goofing around and trying to maintain not just levity, but kind of intimacy with your colleagues and playing is really important. Finally, This is probably the biggest add-on this is probably the biggest add-on to kind of a general approach to self-care that's individualistic. I'd like you to start thinking about self-care relationships. So you want to kind of think about a community of people that improves accountability. So one thing we know about people in general is that they have a bias. They don't see how well they're doing, or they don't see their competencies so clearly. We tend to underestimate, this is a general heuristic, we tend to underestimate our own kind of incompetencies and overestimate others' incompetencies and vice versa. So having other people have eyes on you and kind of have a sense of kind of what you're doing well and how you're feeling about things is really, really important, because it lends a sense of kind of objectivity to your self-care plan. It can be formal or informal. So even a quick break, a phone call, or a conversation, what the old water cooler talk used to be, can relieve the monotony of work as well. And professional conversations and projects, again, provide a sense of ownership and kind of collaboration with other people that can be really, really good for ongoing self-care. In general, you want to create a team of self-care colleagues. And, I don't think that you need to go out and make t-shirts that you wear around together as your self-care team, but you just want to keep it in your mind. This is somebody that I rely on to keep an eye on how I'm doing. And you could even speak explicitly to people that you trust and know and have good relationships with to kind of make agreements about that. So things to remember. It's not just a checklist. It's more, self-care is more of a way of life. Your strategy should be multidimensional. They can be integrated and must be practiced. It's a time. It happens over time. It happens. It happens really quite progressively. So it's not something that you're going to turn the light switch on and everything is going to change, but you're going to think about becoming mindful of what you need. Excuse me, and what different types of interventions on behalf of yourself you can make. Excuse me. And you cannot do it alone. That's where the team comes in, and we need other collaborators that are open to the ideas of self-care. So the biggest thing also is that the effects can be additive. So here's some additive examples. So let's say one thing that you decided to try doing was to eat lunch consistently at noon outside on a walk once a week with a friend. So that kind of intention would check, I'll say check the boxes, even though that's a language that I've said don't do, but that would kind of address all of these different areas of self-care: healthy diet, getting nutrients in, setting boundaries, doing it, consistently saying, this is my time. I'm going out at noon. I'm going to take a walk and have my lunch. And one day a week, I'm going to have it with a friend, because I want to be able to, or maybe a colleague. I want to be able to kind of go over some of the things that I've been going through. That's nurturing self-care relationships. So that has 3 areas of kind of self-care intervention as an integrative example. Here's another one. If you limit context to 15 minutes, no more than 5 before noon and 5 after noon, that's 2 different ways that you're setting boundaries. Changing rooms after 2 to 3 encounters, for example, in your environment, that can create a flourishing environment, also create escapes. 5-minute breathing exercises between encounters can be, that's about being mindful and also setting boundaries, making sure that you do that, saying, between sessions, this is something that you're implementing. That's setting boundaries. And then also telling a colleague about your most significant contact per day is both nurturing a self-care relationship and creating healthy escapes. So you can see how kind of like certain foods are superfoods because they have lots of different types of nutrients. Certain self-care activities are kind of super self-care activities. And these are just examples, like the examples that work best for you are going to be yours, and that way it's really individualized. So that's where it's kind of the onus is on you to think about what is going to work best for you. So going back to this idea of kind of nurturing self-care relationships, this comes from a concept um, that's called it was a concept called competence constellations, and it was again from psychological literature, psychotherapeutic literature, and the idea is that you create a group of basically colleagues that are arranged to keep an eye on you. So it's kind of like a self-care force field. So you foster different layers of relationships with your communities to help support your self-care efforts and create a lifestyle of wellness and competence. That's really where it was coming from. You enlist a community of colleagues and you exchange ideas, you keep accountability up between each other. And having that group is vitally important. And I think that add-on is a piece that could be really important in terms of creating a practice, is finding your constellation of colleagues who can be helpful. So this starts with the inner core. For me, in my current work, my inner core, I have a clinical supervisor that I meet with once a month. That's somebody that I've known for a long time, that I trust, that I work with clinically. I have colleagues that I talk to. I have friends that I talk to about different personal things, professional things, how those things interact. That's kind of my inner core. Certainly my partner and my close friends are also part of my inner core, and they help to kind of keep an eye on me, help me keep working well. The next ring out is your collegial community. And I think that's who you are sitting here with today. And your collegial community is kind of like the people if you're in the office, they're the people that you kind of go to work with every single day. And they might not be kind of your closest confidants, but they're the people that are in your spheres of expertise and you have regular contact with. And they're really important. And actually, in my clinical practice, I've recently tried to expand my collegial community by enlisting formal supervisory relationships with other clinicians to be part of my practice. So I have kind of consulting psychologists and clinicians that are not part of my group meetings every single week, but that at any given time, if one of my supervisees needs to go to somebody else and get a quick consultation on a particular issue that they're having with one of their patients, they might go to one of these consulting collegial community people that I've been enlisting in my practice. That's for me. That's something that I've been working on mindfully. And you can think about for you who that might be and how you might kind of foster that type of community. Then you've got your collegial acquaintances. Those are people that are part of the college community, that are certainly part of maybe higher ed and part of your institution, but you might not have regular contact with, but maybe making contact with somebody every once in a while, or going to a particular meeting that's a group meeting that provides kind of a more distal or a further out kind of way of contacting people than just your inner circle and your close colleagues, can also provide a sense of connection that can be really bolstering in terms of self-care. And then of course you have your professional culture, and knowing what the issues that are relevant to academic advisement and how being in the culture of academic advisement either helps you or can be exhausting for you is also really important to keep in mind. So with these, so basically, what you want to be able to do is be intentional, be mindful about what your self-care needs are. I've listed 8 different areas of self-care that I think might be relevant for academic advisement, and they might not. So they might be differentially for each person. So you need to come up with a kind of an individualized plan and do it in a way that involves other people, involves your colleagues, brings a sense of community in this new normal. And we owe it to our students, we owe it to ourselves. And I stand behind it. It has worked really well in my current practice. And so I thank you. I wonder if there are questions. Sharon Ricks, Dr. Ricks, if you see any questions that people have, I think there's extra time. We got an early start.
So right now, yes, people should feel free to put their questions in the Q&A, but there are some comments. So Matthew says, this is an incredibly important topic to discuss right now. Very beneficial having someone present on self-care from a clinical psychologist perspective and in the context of the work of an academic advisor. Benjamin says, almost everything on the list from top to bottom, I work on my own pace, applicable in my case. Joanna has, I've noticed just sitting on my porch for lunch usually helps me refresh and I get back to work much more productive.
Oh, I love that one. I love that one. It's good. I agree. Yes.
Gabrielle has, we might see less students, but the sessions are more intense, emotional, personal, and longer.
Oh goodness, can I just make a comment about that? Yeah, this is what this I think is, this is a astute observation. It's like the quality of work and the emotional investment. It's not just, you know, the numbers. It's not just how many people you see. It's what you're talking about and how you manage what you talk about with students who might need a lot more than just an advisement session, and being able to kind of navigate that. That's where the skill and the skill of academic advisement comes in, but also the importance of knowing how this is going to impact you and how you can sustain yourself. Put your mask on, put your oxygen mask on first, and know where to make a referral, and know how to kind of take care of that type of a new type of engagement with students as the world has become a far more stressful place, I'd say.
Okay, we have from Eva. Students seem to be having an even harder time with time management because of the fire hose effect. They get overwhelmed by getting all the communications via a screen. Balls get dropped.
Oh gosh, the fire hose. That is, I'm speechless. I can only imagine. Yeah, I mean, there are, just like that in those first couple slides, there are so many different things that can come up and so many different things that do come up. That's where I think really being able to set boundaries about what you can talk about and what you can't. And of course, doing it in a way that is respectful and that is, you know, as nurturing as possible, and also leaving room for people to have different things happening is of utmost importance. But the shift, this is where having the data from just the survey would be helpful. Just what I'm hearing is anecdotally here is that the quality of interactions has really changed, and that I guess is also what I garnered from the informal conversations I had before this talk.
Okay, we have, let's see. Okay. What if this is, what if you get the feeling that your supervisors or college structure does not support these concepts? They give wordplay to it, but you know they really don't care. That's a tough one.
That's a tough one. I might leave that one for you, Dr. Ricks. I'm just, it's hard. Listen, so like one thing, even creating this presentation, it's a tough concept to get people on board with, because they're soft skills. They're vitally important, and that's what I'm saying. It's an ethical imperative, but like trying to get people who are driven by trying to get butts in the seats and students, you know, actually engaging with school, oftentimes forget. So I'd say, you know, starting small and creating you know, a kind of a bubble around yourself. That's that kind of inner circle, and maybe having some conversations about ways that, you know, you could implement some more infrastructure for self-care in your group. I don't think that necessarily it would be seen as if it were brought up explicitly, I don't think necessarily it would be seen as a bad use of resources or time, especially as we go on in this pandemic. I mean, I think paying attention to self-care really should be one of the biggest kind of thrusts of ongoing work and management. And that's my opinion. And there are other factors at play, of course, other important factors at play, but it's a real challenge. And I hear you. I mean, like trying to get resources, trying to get time, trying to get kind of buy-in, especially of kind of the higher ups, can feel like it's difficult sometimes.
We have from Richard, how do you force, in quotations, work-life balance with your staff?
There's the other side of the coin, isn't it?
Correct.
Force is the operative word there. It can't be something that's forced. I think if you were to, if Richard is coming from kind of a managerial point of view, it's kind of an ethic. It's kind of a way of being in the world. And if you are to foster it yourself, if you're to introduce suggestions and kind of live them oneself, then that can kind of trickle down. It's not something that happens overnight, but it's kind of a shift in kind of culture that I think but it can happen with specific policies. Like you might, as a manager, say something like, I'd like you to I'd like each employee, each advisor to experiment with different numbers of students. And we'll talk about it in your next kind of, in our next, group meeting. We'll talk about what it was like to try different numbers at the same time and try different self-care techniques, to be intentional and to be explicit about trying these things operationally, might add some accountability to the ideas, and might give some of your employees some internal motivation to try.
Okay, let's see. Okay, this is a long one. So, do you have strategies to recover from burnout if we haven't been able to do self-care over the last year and have already hit burnout?
Oh, goodness.
There is a lot of buzzwords about self-care in the office, but no time to support or even set boundaries or prioritize. 2-day weekends are starting to feel like 30-minute lunch breaks.
Oh, I laugh, but it's sad. I mean, I'm laughing because it makes me nervous. It's like, yeah, you're right. And I felt it too. I mean, one of the things that's so stark about all of this, it's like I say take a vacation, but where are you going to take a vacation? You can't go anywhere outside of New York State without having a whole COVID protocol to even get back into New York State. It's not particularly pleasant to even go on a vacation right now. One thing that came to my mind is, well, wouldn't it be great to just have a break? Now, that can't work, I'd say, that won't work the same way it has in the past. It really is about doing the small kind of daily, minuscule things that make a difference. And setting boundaries is hard. I mean, that's saying no. And I'm not, the idea here isn't to kind of create an advisor up. Kind of advisor outrage and get people to revolt, but it's just to say, like, to be intentional about, okay, this is how many people I'm going to see. It doesn't matter how much time, how many people are left needing something. I will need to see them tomorrow. To be able to do that is a practice. It's not simple. It's not often kind of explicitly supported, but that's where that kind of the powers that be need to take into account that it is an important thing. For me, it's been getting out. It's been taking naps, getting out during the day, getting out between sessions and taking a walk, going to the park, getting into nature for me has been really, really useful. And one thing I'll say is that a bright sunny day feels very, very different than a cloudy, rainy, or snowy day. This winter has been brutal, and that's something I've been mindful of. So as it's gotten a little bit nicer, I get out of my work clothes, I get into some exercise clothes, and I just go out and be outside for a while. It clears it. It clears things so that I can. And that's what I was about that example about going out and having lunch outside and doing, you know, maybe connecting with a friend, something that's not advising related to, you know, on a moment to moment basis can really start to help. It's these just noticeable differences that accumulate to create you know, wellness and flourishing rather than distress and stress. And so taking steps to make small changes, it could really be helpful. And also, again, enlisting friends to help you with that and colleagues to help you with that.
Here's a comment. It has here from Anonymous. Thank you for your amazing advice. This validates what I've been feeling lately. When my day is not overwhelmed with appointments, I have a much more impactful advising session. My group chat with some of my colleagues this year has saved my mental health.
Wonderful. Group chats are excellent. They're on the screen. There's that. But yeah, that is a wonderful example.
Let's see. Another question. So many of us have lost people due to COVID-19 and still have to work. What about grieving?
Yes, let's not overlook the profound impact. We're all working from home. We all, you know, we have to kind of take that into account, but we're all dealing with a totally different world. And sometimes, many times, often these days, people have been directly impacted by either a family member being sick, maybe even advisors have been sick themselves. So kind of coming to terms with what the new normal health-wise is going to be for a particular advisor, or coming to terms with what a family constellation is going to look like if you've lost somebody. Grieving. That's where it's kind of a gratuitous plug for my current profession, but that's where setting aside 45 minutes a week for yourself can be really in therapy, to grieve, to not think about advisement, to not think about, you know, what's going to happen, but to actually make room for you to tell your story about your experience. And frankly, you know, personal therapy is that's something that has been part of therapeutic training since the beginning of time. And that's something that I teach all my mental health counseling students. Like, if you're going to be doing this work, you should be in therapy. I don't think that it's absolutely necessary for everybody to be in therapy all the time. But right now, it can really help. And if you don't do therapy, you could do something like making sure that 45 minutes a week you talk to a spiritual leader, or talk to a close confidant that you trust. But just to make room. Set boundaries, make room for what you need, especially when you're grieving. If you don't do it, it's going to be far worse in the long run.
We have another comment. I think it's important for advisors to understand that it isn't their fault if they cannot help a student with something of a more personal nature. Simply letting go of some of the guilt and understanding that the guilt doesn't belong to you could be an important form of self-care.
I couldn't agree more. That's one of the things that I made a comment about earlier, that like advisors as people, in my experience, are some of the most caring and kind of responsibility taking people. And that's great as long as you don't overwhelm yourself. It's great as long as it doesn't get to you with guilt and get to you with, well, I should be able to do this. You can do what you can do, and you say no to what you can't. And you do that in a way that's not obnoxious, or doesn't kind of, you know, isn't antithetical to, you know, being supportive, but understanding what you can do and what you can't, and not beating yourself up about it is really important. Mindfulness can really help you with that, to get you out of your mind and into the present, out of kind of, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, why can't I do this, and into your breathing, into the present moment. That's also where breathing, a breathing practice can really be helpful, to center yourself out of this kind of constellation of responsibility that I think advisors are really prone to taking, because as a group, I think they're kind of overly caring people, and that's not necessarily always a bad thing, right?
So Adam, there are lots of questions in the chat related to how we talk to our leadership, our supervisors about self-care. I'll read you one anonymous comment we have here.
Okay.
But there are quite a few of them around the same topic. Everything you say is valid and resonates. We are trying so hard to meet our students where they are, and for the most part succeeding. But upper management gives us lip service and beats us down about enrollment numbers. Our caseloads, up to 400 students, are ridiculous and unmanageable. We are told to get everything done, work above our hours, and not to put it on our timesheets. Adam, how do we have the conversations with our supervisors and our leadership about the importance of self-care? Sorry.
It's saddening and it's distressing. And I think what I can say is it's one of the hardest things about higher ed in this country and in this city in particular is that it is an economics game. It's, we have to have the funds. We have to make sure that the students are getting through the degrees. We have to see the results. And I think on some level, I think the onus is on the management to start to hear these comments and start to take these comments to their big meetings. I hate to put it that way. I hate to kind of take sides. And also in terms of how to have the conversations, I think you persist. You keep having the conversations, and you keep, and it's not about not about kind of woe is me. I don't, I'm burnt out here. I can't, but to come up with ideas, things to implement, programs to implement within any kind of advisement center, for example. I've got an idea. Can we kind of have as part of our day, a self-care check-in with a buddy, or think about like what would you do with there are peer mentoring programs where new students have a buddy with a current student. You could have that with a kind of a self-care buddy system or something like that. This is just kind of off the top of my head, but coming up with ideas that can be implemented. that can be held, can be accountable, that can be kind of programmatically accountable. That is one suggestion, to think about, what your self-care constellation of people could be and how you could kind of formalize self-care into the work that you do through kind of like one of those kind of creative programs I was talking about. I think it's a great idea, and maybe it's especially important right now since we're in the pandemic and things are probably never going to be the same. This has got to be part of the new normal. This has got to be implemented, and or else, what's going to happen is you're going to lose advisor. People are going to burn out. And there's an imperative.
Let's see. Quite a few people have talked about the group chats that was mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Are very helpful. Let's see. Well, here's a comment. I practice self-care and have developed exercise groups with my friends who are grieving, upset, depressed, and they express how much they appreciate motivating each other to eat better, do power walks, drinking water, etc. Also develop a book club to help in this endeavor, all done via text. I greet and motivate every morning, and then throughout the rest of the day with information about their accomplishments.
I can't, that's just a superstar right there. You're on it. You're in a self-care mode. That's as flourishing perhaps as you can be right now. And this, in answer to the other questions as well, it's doing what you can do individually, like in whatever free time that you have to kind of optimize all those things. Optimize. That's what they do, and they create a sense of wellness. I mean, even in the kind of um, tenor of the comment, there's a pride, there's a vitality that is partly there because you're exercising, because you're connecting with people, because you're kind of coordinating a book group that's different than the academic advisement work that you're doing, that it's different than the ways in which you've come to become exhausted by the work that you do, and that helps you do the work that you do. So it really is a wonderful example of an individual way that commenter has implemented a really fundamentally sound self-care plan.
This is from an anonymous. The comment is, as a manager, mother, and wife, I find myself working longer hours and doing more self-check with my advising staff and students than myself. Unfortunately, I feel there's no real check-in for middle management.
Yep, that's right. It gets lost. It gets lost in the shuffle, and that's where you becoming mindful of what you need, and then reaching out and asking. That's where you getting your constellation of people that can be helpful with that, and then taking the 20 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day to be attentive to that. In some ways, I mean, the question about, well, is there going to be some infrastructure provided by the higher ups? It's like, well, there might be. We hope there is. If there are forces that we don't have much control over, but what we do have control over is ourselves. And each individualized plan is going to be driven by the extent to which you engage in it. So for that person, yeah, I would say, like just say, for me, I need this. I need 45 minutes here to go to therapy. I need an hour a day to get out and take a jog around the block. I need to figure out a way to get away from my family, away from my colleagues, away from my supervisees. Now, is that going to happen overnight because you say so? No, it's going to happen stepwise. It's going to happen progressively. But as you're attentive to it, and as you make those small steps, it's going to build on itself, and you're going to feel more efficacy to do more of it, and to be more connected to what it is that you need, and make small steps to move in the direction of flourishing, away from impairment, distress, and stress.
And we just talked about, I think, baby steps, and a comment just came in, or a question really. For those who have gained the COVID-19, and it may be hard to walk the whole block, are there any baby steps that you can recommend? Not just about exercise, but in terms of starting on the path of self-care, what would be some of the first steps a person can take?
For me, the baby steps are really, it's in the slide that's about changing scenery. So if you can't take a whole walk around the block, find a bench to sit on, and go and sit and get off of your phone and look at the blue sky and just breathe. Try a breathing exercise. Try something else that gets you a change of scenery, that gets you out of thinking about, what all the stuff that you've been dealing with. And by the way, again, if you've had COVID and you're also dealing with that, and you're also dealing with sometimes the lingering effects of that, health-wise and kind of mentally, it is remarkably difficult. But those types of baby steps, I mean, it could be literally going to a different room of the house. It could be calling an old friend from when you were in school, and just getting a change of pace is a really easy, simple thing that you can implement in 5 minutes. But if you just kind of go on autopilot and just try to get as many, advising appointments in, and try to do the work just so you can get finally through the day and clock out and do whatever, it's like that's not mindful, and that's not attentive to what you need. And that's not how the body and the mind work. So I'd say, if it's not walking around a full block, take a walk to a bench and just sit and breathe. And that seems simple, and it seems like, well, what is that really going to do? That's going to create space. And with space, you can start to, maybe after doing that for a few days, you can start to think about, I wonder what else I can do. I wonder what other kind of interventions for myself I can do. I wonder what else would help. It's starting to think about yourself as the apparatus, as the tool that actually needs to be well in order to work. And when you're talking about recovering from COVID or any other illness or any grieving process, that absolutely, in my opinion, has to come first. Otherwise, you've lost yourself and you've lost your wellness, and you're not gonna work as well.
Let's see. Well, we have about 3 more minutes. Any parting words of advice for us, Adam, as we close out?
I think the biggest piece for me that I haven't probably emphasized enough is that it is really a long-term thing. It's not that it's not a checklist that if you do this, this, and this, you're going to feel better, but it's kind of an approach. It's a way of looking at yourself. It's a way of being attentive to yourself, of being mindful to what you need physically, mentally, kind of in terms of the types of activities that you're doing. How do you feel when you're advising over Zoom? How do you feel when you're taking 6 students in a row and not having a break, not getting water, not having a change of scenery? Do you need a vacation? Is it possible to get a vacation? What are the possibilities? That all happens over the course of months, and it can happen over the course of, and it really is more of a way of being in the world. I think the main purpose of this talk is to say it can start here. It doesn't end today, though. It doesn't end now that you have this information. Think about how you might enlist some of your collegial associates, maybe your boss, maybe people in your college, to be more attentive to these things, because you're going to need it. We're all going to need it, and our students need us to do it. So it's really a way of life. It's really an ongoing process, and it works. You can see from some of the comments today, people do function differently when they're attentive to it. And so I wish you well with it. I wish you all the best in continuing. And I also want to just relay a profound thank you to you, Sharon, for helping me with this presentation and for inviting me to do this, because I think this is among the most important kind of soft skills to think about as an academic advisor. And your students will thank you for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Dr. Doncic. Your talk obviously is extremely vital for all of us. Just the reminder of self-care and how important it is for us to be whole for ourselves, right? And for the students that we serve. So thank you again. And especially for the tips. And, I definitely feel like I've learned some new things and have the ability to just walk away with some, additional tools in my pocket for myself, but also to help support my team during this time and beyond. So thank you so much for your time and for being here with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, we look forward to seeing you again, I'm sure. So attendees will now transition to the concurrent session. So again, you can access the list of session options, right? And the links through the official Advising Summit webpage. You can get this information, right, by clicking the link provided to you in your confirmation email. Or again, as I mentioned earlier today in the opening, you can go to tinyurl.com/Advising Summit 2021. Again, tinyurl.com /Advising Summit 2021. That's just the short link to make it easier for you to find the page. After the session, however, please remember to return back to this space for our final keynote address, our closing remarks, and also our video montage. And again, we buffered in breaks. So there is a 10-minute break. The next session doesn't start until 10:30 a.m. And as part of your self-care constellation group, right, I want you and encourage and empower you to please really take a break during this 10 minutes, right? Get up, stretch, go to a window. Joanna, if you're not already on your porch, please go outside to your porch, right? Get some fresh air. I think it's super important to do that. So please take that time, take this 10 minutes, even this short time is vital to, again, our self-care and our health and wellness. And we'll see you at 10:30. So thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our last part of CUNY Advising Summit. My name is Nicholas Hewitt. I'm Strategy Director at Complete College America, and it's my pleasure to join you today. This is my third time to be lucky enough to participate in CUNY Advising Summit, and every time I'm amazed by the great work that you guys are doing across the system. For those who don't know, Complete College America, we're a nonprofit organization. We work with across the country in 47 alliance members, pretty much around like 38 states across the country, as well as 9 consortium and systems, including CUNY. We're the ones basically responsible for 15 to finish, momentum year, core requisite, support, math pathways, purpose first, and so on and so forth. And all of our strategies really integrate quite purposefully academic advising. One, we understand that the role that you play in the implementation, if those strategies need to be implemented appropriately and successfully, academic advisors have to be involved at every level of their implementation. But also because we really want to make sure that we get the perspective that you are able to provide. Usually, academic advisors have this, can actually see the big picture about like if this policy comes in or this practice starts, this is how it's going to impact students and their success and so on and so forth. So we want to make sure that you're at the forefront, that you're at the table during the implementation and the planning of these strategies so that your perspective can actually be shared with other folks at your institutional in different offices and different responsibility levels as well. And obviously, your perspective helped us, inform our practices so that we can actually share best practices and policies across the country as well. So, and one thing that is pretty important for us as well is not just to hear from you and to take from you, but how can we actually also support you and provide you professional development or other support basically in your job. So that's why I think a lot of times most of our events will include representatives from NACADA, like Charlie and Sean yesterday. All this to say, again, I've been able to jump in and out of different sessions in the last 2 days, and again, quite impressed with your resiliency, your innovation, and all the work that you've done in um, very difficult situation, to say the least. And particularly impressed also with uh, the fact that you've maintained students at the core of your work. Uh, and again, I think that speaks volume as to uh, the great work and the purpose, really, of academic advising, and how you've definitely met and exceeded that bar. One thing I would like to do here in a few minutes is not only, I would like to for you to encourage you to continue to share your successes and your practices, not only in the context of the CUNY system, which I think I love this concept of sharing with each other, like, this is what we're doing, this has worked really well, let us know how we can help, and so on and so forth. I love that. But there's so much, so many other institutions across the country that I would have to say need your perspective and you need your practices. So one, I want to encourage you to, submit proposals to participate and, present NACADA, NASPA, FYE conferences, and so much, and so others, because what you've done, and I can speak from someone, comes at a national level, is pretty remarkable. And I think that a lot of folks need to hear what you guys have been doing. And in that regard, this is kind of what CCA does as well. Like, we like to showcase success and highlight institutions and practitioners who are doing a great job. So in this, I would like to invite you to connect with me and connect with Complete College America. It's completecollege.org, to go to see our website. We're in the process of creating webinars. We host webinars every 2 weeks. We host podcasts every 2 weeks or so. We publish blogs on our website. So I would encourage you to please reach out to me and let me know, how can I help to basically showcase and highlight what you have done. And just quick word: yesterday after your sessions, I was talking to somebody in Oklahoma. And she said, "Well, I didn't think you guys would be interested. We're a 2-year school in Tulsa, and I don't think that you or other folks across the nation would be really interested in what I'm doing." And I was like, "You need to remove that doubt from your mind." Okay, so again, I'm here to tell you what you do is great. How can we make sure that we actually share this? And if you have time, you don't have time. I think that's something that we hear all the time. It's like, "Well, I'm busy." I get that. We're looking at blogs or podcasts. Basically, if you have 20, 30 minutes, I'm happy to get on a Zoom call with you, where I know Zoom, we're all zoomed out, but get on a Zoom call with you and just record and have a different, a quick conversation. And there you go. We take care of the rest and we create a podcast from what you're saying. The same thing with blogs. Like, we're not talking about a huge academic paper that needs to be peer reviewed and so on and so forth. We're talking about a short blog, like 2 pages or so. Talk about your experience, talk about your practices and what you've seen and why you've done it, and so on and so forth. So again, please reach out to me. I think that what you've done needs to be shared outside of the CUNY system. And I would, again, urge you to reach out to me in that regard. So again, company.org. And by the way, we're a nonprofit. We're not selling you anything. It doesn't cost you anything other than your time. And again, we want to make sure that we showcase your successes. So enough about the professional. We're here really to hear a little bit more about how the personal aspect and the self-care is so important, and continue the great presentation from Adam this morning. So I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Brandy Probst. Brandy has over 15 years of experience in higher education as a scholar practitioner. She currently serves as the director of Elon 101 and assistant director of academic advising within the Konigsberger Learning Center at Elon University in North Carolina. In her role as director of Elon 101, Brandy oversees advisor training, faculty development, curriculum development, peer education, and cross-divisional partnerships for 110 sections of the first-year academic advising seminar, which integrates first-year transition topics and first-year advising for all incoming first-year students. Brandy also serves as Assistant Director of Academic Advising, where she serves on a team of 5 supplemental advisors who assist the larger campus community with advising and academic support needs. As if she's not busy enough, she's also in the 4th year of her PhD program in educational studies with a concentration in higher education program at UNC Greensboro. Her research interests include the self-care practices of higher education professionals, like you, and the expenses of Black women student affairs professionals. She's contributed to over 40 presentations and publications on various topics in the higher education field, to include self-care practices, advising as social justice work, first-year experience program, Black women in higher education, pay equity, salary negotiation, DEI, and personal branding and digital identity, amongst others. So with this, I'm happy to yield the mic and the floor and the camera to Brandy.
Give me 1 second to get my screen going here and make sure I'm sharing. So first and foremost, as Nicholas said, I am Brandy Probst, and I am happy to be here with you all today. I am looking forward to having this conversation. I first want to thank Complete College America for providing me with the opportunity to speak with you all. And I also want to thank the CUNY system for agreeing to have me. I hope that you all had a really good time over the last 2 days or so and learned a great deal of information that you can take back to your campuses and utilize to serve your students. And so, as Nicholas said, I coordinate and I run a first-year seminar program that is based in advising. And with that, I have about 110 advisors who I support and manage, and they come from all different departments across campus, all departments and divisions, their faculty and their staff. And so today is the first day of registration. So please forgive me if you hear my email ding or if you hear my phone buzz, as there may be some people who are trying to get in touch with me, but I am dedicating this next 45 minutes or so to you all to have this very, very important conversation. I also want to say that I am not a healthcare professional in any way, shape, or form. I come to you today as a colleague, a fellow advisor who is concerned about the state of our profession and all the things that we have experienced over the last year, but also as a fellow advisor who has experienced this with you. And I'm concerned about the state of our well-being as higher education professionals, because as you see, we tend to put our students and our work first, which is why I come to you today to have this conversation about putting your mask on first and why you should make self-care your new normal. As you know, and I'm sure you've talked about throughout the conference, we've had an extremely long and abnormal year. And I say abnormal, recognizing that some of us have embraced it as our new normal, right? But even before March 2020, I do want to recognize that we were all doing this work prior to, and that it has been heightened because of the pandemic and because of racial injustice issues that we have experienced. But I don't want to take away from the fact that we were all still doing this work at very, very high levels and in very stressful ways prior to the pandemic. And so I do want to recognize that. And I do want to make sure that we all are recognizing that and giving some space to that. I also recognize that before March 2020, the topic of self-care for a lot of folks, it was a hot topic, it was commodified. People were, they thought of self-care in ways that weren't authentic. But I do think now with what we have experienced that self-care is even more important than ever, especially for the work that we do as advisors. And so before we get started with this conversation, I want to take a few minutes for us to just slow down and breathe. And so if you're like me, this is probably your 4th or 5th virtual conference. within this academic year. My last virtual conference was last week, and I made an intentional decision not to attend the live sessions. And so for those of you who are here live, and I think there's about 300 or so people here with me live, I appreciate you for being here. But I had so many virtual conferences and Zoom meetings that I was just kind of tired. I was tired of the hustle and bustle because what I realized is that while I was attending the virtual conference, I was multitasking and doing 10,000 other things, right? So for most of you, you're probably at home, you're probably still working from home. Some of you may even be on campus now, but you're multitasking. You're trying to listen to these presentations and absorb all this information so that you can develop yourself as an advisor. But at the same time, you're checking email, you're answering questions, you're answering phone calls. And some of us, if we're at home like me, you're also double checking and making sure that, like for me, making sure my 16-year-old is not playing the PS4 instead of being logged on to school, right? And so we're juggling all these things. And it's just, it becomes a lot. It becomes to weigh on us. And at some point, it's important for us to just take some time to breathe. And so I'm going to ask you to join me in doing a breathing meditation exercise for about 5 minutes. And I'm going to ask you to give yourself 5 minutes to just breathe and to be still and to center yourself before we have this talk about why you should put your mask on and why you should make self-care your new normal. So try to ignore all the phones that are ringing, try to ignore the questions and the email dings that you may be getting, and just try to take in this next 5 minutes with me, please.
Thanks for gifting yourself these next few minutes. It's important to remember that you're a priority, and allowing yourself even just a few short minutes of intentional reflection can really have a positive impact on the rest of your day. So let's use these next few minutes to come back to center and set an intention for the rest of your day. Move into a comfortable position, whether you're seated at your desk at work or laying shift all of your attention onto your breathing. Taking slower, deeper breaths only so far. Taking a deep breath in, slowly. Feeling your lungs expand out as you inhale. Noticing how it feels. Noticing if there's anything that it's trying to tell you. Notice any place of tension or tightness in your body. Those areas permission to relax. Sending love into those areas. Thank your body for such good care. And let it know that it's okay to rest. Notice that your mind starts to wander off. That's okay. It's natural. Just notice it and bring your attention back to your body, to your breath. Try to picture one thing that's happened that's made you smile, that is thankful or appreciative. Just have that feeling floating up. Top of your head. Yourself to smile. Now focus on something that you can do to whether it's for yourself or for someone else. Allow you to continue feeling this way. Something as small as deciding to go to bed tonight. Spending the time to find that book that's from the bedside table. Or the joy of getting dinner with a close friend. What's one little thing you can plan to enjoy too? Now just focus on that for a few minutes. Sit in that feeling of joy. breath than the one before it. Holding that breath through. Last time that you just send the breath through your entire body. Your own time. So bring awareness back to it. Thank yourself for taking these few minutes. Just be intentional. Kind of yourself. And we'll begin.
So I hope that you feel calmer, you feel less stressed, you feel less overwhelmed. And I hope that, again, that you thank yourself for giving yourself that 5 minutes. I do this periodically throughout my workday. It is a pretty hectic day, and between meetings and committees and student appointments and talking to parents. And so if I can grab even just 1 minute to just do a breathing exercise or to do a full 5-minute meditation, it has served me well. And so even for folks that may not be into meditation, just the simple act of just breathing is very helpful. And so I hope that that this is something that you feel as if you feel better and that you feel relaxed. But I also hope this is something that you may go back to in the future in case you need it. Because ask yourself, when was the last time that you gave yourself 5 minutes to just breathe, to do nothing else, to not think about what's the next meeting that's coming up, or to not think about the next student appointment, or what you need to do when you get home that afternoon and pick up the groceries and all of those types of things. When is the last time you gave yourself just time to breathe? And so in thinking about that, I know we've all experienced quite a few things over the last year, and I'll talk a little bit about that some more, but I do want to acknowledge that we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat, right? And I think that is important to recognize that that we're all in different places and spaces. We're all experiencing things very differently. I recognize that I identify as a Black woman, and the things that I have experienced in terms of what is going on in our country, on our campuses, is very different than what other folks have experienced because of their identities. But I also recognize that I have privilege in being able to have a job that allows me to work from home, from the safety of my home, and allows me to be at home with my son as he's doing virtual school, right? And allows my family to be able to do those things. And so I recognize, and I want folks to know that I'm not saying that our experiences are monolithic, but I do want to recognize that we are all experiencing this similar storm, even if we're not in the same boat, right? And so, and when we're talking about advising as our new normal, these are all the things that we've been managing. New work environments, new technologies, you know, for my campus, and I'll share personal stories here. For my campus, the rollout to online courses was very new to us. Elon is a smaller, medium-sized institution, and we only had online courses during the summer. So it was a very new experience for faculty in terms of shifting to online at a very quick pace, right? And so all of these new things that we had to manage and learn, some of us are caregivers, some of us just understanding the social distance protocols and mask wearing, the political environment that we were experiencing, as well as policing, community relations, discrimination, oppressive structures. There's a ton of things that we've all had to manage, right? And because of the things that we've had to manage, we're experiencing what a lot of healthcare professionals are calling that COVID-19 fatigue, or that pandemic fatigue, because we were experiencing all of those things before the pandemic, but the pandemic has heightened all of these experiences, right? But what we also know is that as advisors, and because of the things we have experienced, we're experiencing compassion fatigue, vicarious traumatization, emotional labor. Because of racial injustices, we're experiencing racial battle fatigue and racism, amongst many other things. And I'll share with you that I came to this work and I came to this conversation around advisors and self-care because I was on a research team while in as a part of my PhD program. And we were researching the self-care practices of social justice and diversity professionals in higher education. And through our findings, we saw that there were high levels of emotional labor, high levels of vicarious traumatization, high levels of racial battle fatigue, but also high levels of compassion fatigue. And as we were going through our findings, I realized I don't identify as a social justice and diversity professional. However, that is a huge part of my work. But I realized these are similar things that I experienced as an advisor and throughout my career and working in advising and in being in a helping profession. And so for me, a light bulb went off and I was like, you know, social justice and diversity professionals, they're on the front line of those social justice issues on campus. But advisors, we're on the front lines in different ways, but we are experiencing very similar things, right? We have high levels of compassion fatigue because we tend to be very compassionate people in the roles that we have. We have high levels of vicarious traumatization. Our students come to us with a lot of different situations and a lot of different things that are happening in their life as a college student. And they tend to dump a lot of those things on us and share with us so that we can help them through those resources. But in doing so, sometimes we experience vicarious traumatization through them and we carry that. And so I'll share a story about one of my former students who is no longer at Elon, but she was my advisee for about 2 years, and she had some serious, she struggled with mental health issues. And so she had suicidal ideations. It's just, it was a lot in terms of her mental health. And we were connecting her with the healthcare professionals that she needed. And whenever we would get emails about students who were either hospitalized as a part of our behavioral intervention task force or unit that I've been a part of, whenever we would get notifications or emails, I would find myself kind of holding my breath before I checked the email, because I would think, what if she's on this list? And I started to realize that I would get stressed, I would get tense, I'd get kind of panicked before I opened the email because she was one of the students that I knew was very, very high risk for certain things. And so every time the list would come out, I would always just stress myself out about looking at the list and would be very nervous about if she was going to be on the list or not. And there were other students on that list as well who I had not met with or who I did not know, but there was something about knowing that there was a student that I had that was struggling at this level and kind of being scared to see if she was on that list. And so I started to realize I carried that with me. And although she's no longer at our institution, I think about her multiple times a semester. I mean, I wonder where she is. I wonder how she's doing. I wonder if she's healthy. And so, you know, I always check to see if she re-enrolls. And so we carry the things that our students share with us. And I think that is important to realize and to recognize what we are experiencing as advisors so that we are able to take care of ourselves in better ways, right? Because in doing so, a lot of times we have these feelings. So these are things that we may be feeling because we are experiencing or feeling, you know, that compassion fatigue and the vicarious traumatization. Those things may result in moodiness, lack of sleep, extreme fatigue. I don't know about you all, but I know my fall semester, my sleep pattern was all over the place. It was just a lot going on with coming back to campus and being remote and what that looked like for students and for us in our office. And as advisors, we were really in the thick of it with supporting students through all of that. And we were impacted, right, in various ways. And for a lot of us, we may be experiencing kind of mindfulness or what we call this COVID fog or pandemic fog. It may be a lack of motivation or apathy. And for many of us, we've experienced loss in multiple ways, grief. And for some of us, maybe it's anger or fear, right? So because we experience those types of things in terms of compassion fatigue and vicarious traumatization, emotional labor, we know and research shows that these are some of the side effects of experiencing those things, right? And these things can manifest in actual physical and emotional and mental health issues, right? And so some of the research that we did about social justice and diversity professionals is very similar to some of the research that you'll see about advisors. You will see that there are folks in who are in higher education that are experiencing high levels of high blood pressure, high levels of ulcers and headaches and migraines. And all of these things tend to come from those things that we are experiencing because of the work that we do. And what that tends to lead to is what we know as burnout. That is that physical, emotional, and mental state that is observed in people in constant face-to-face professional interaction, which would be advisors, with other people. And that involves that physical fatigue, that long-term exhaustion, that despairedness and hopelessness. And then sometimes it may result in a concept of negative self-feelings of inefficiency or negative attitude towards others. I know that there were a number of folks in my office and on campus last semester that were just like, you know, I feel like I'm not being very effective. I'm showing up and doing this work, but I don't know if it's actually working, right? And a lot of that was coming from those feelings of burnout. And so this is all very important. And this is why we are talking today about why you should put your mask on first. And so if any of you have ever flown a plane, boarded a plane, you know, one of the first things they tell you with the emergency procedures is that in the event of an emergency, please put your mask on first before assisting others. And this is a very, very important point, because what we know and what any research that you do about academic advising and compassion fatigue or self-care, you will see that the literature shows that there is a connection to lack of self-care for advisors and their effectiveness as advisors, as well as the ability to build rapport with students and the personal relationships that they have within their office. Which I think is really important as well, because for many of us, we work on advising teams. And so like I was saying, I manage 110 advisors, but I also work amongst an advising team, and we're a pretty close team in terms of how our office operates and functions. And we can typically tell when one of us are just burned out and are just at our limit. And we can typically tell that by how we're all interacting with one another, right? And so these are very, very important things about why we need to allow ourselves to take care of ourselves first so that we can take better care of others. And those others are being our students, right? If we want to be effective advisors for our students, we have to think about putting ourselves first. And I know that for a lot of us, that is a difficult concept. I am a mother. It is a concept that I've had to embrace and think about. And it is very similar to the plane analogy, but any other areas in your life, is that if you want to be able to give to others and take care of others and be there for others, you are not going to be able to do that if you are not taking care of yourself first. Because as the saying goes, you cannot pour from an empty cup, right? And so really, really think about that and embrace that. And, you know, in terms of thinking about how advising is the new normal, how we're advising in the new normal, I want you to think about how self-care shows up as a part of that process. And so what we know is that sometimes advising can be transactional, right? Sometimes students come into our office, or parents and family members may have questions, and they're strictly transactional. But we also know that advising can be transformational. And I think in order for us to be able to transform our students, then we must first transform ourselves. And an important step in doing that is taking care of ourselves so that we can continue the great work that we are doing. And so a lot of the things that I've shared are probably things you've heard before. And so what I really want to do with this session is get you to thinking about, what does self-care look like to me? What are some things that I need to consider in my self-care practices? And so here's some things I want you to think about. And you may want to jot some things down in terms of asking yourself these questions. So ask yourself, what does self-care mean to you? For a lot of people, when they think about self-care, they're thinking about external forms of self-care. So maybe it's, I'm going and getting a pedicure or a manicure, or I'm getting my hair cut today, or, I really enjoy eating M&Ms. So that's my self-care for me. Or I want to binge watch a TV show and relax on the couch. Those are all external means of self-care. But I really want folks to also think about, what are those internal forms of self-care? What are the things that I'm doing for my mind, my body, and my spirit that then impact the other types of self-care that I do? So ask yourself, When's the last time you made that doctor appointment that you needed to, right? When's the last time you had an ache or a pain and said, oh, it's nothing, right? But you're not really taking care of it. So think about those things that we do externally for ourselves in terms of taking care of our body, and make those just as important as the external things that we do in terms of how we take care of ourselves and our body. The other thing I want you to consider is, are we practicing what we preach to our students? And I think that's a really good question, right? We talk to our students, at least I do, about self-care and how you're taking care of yourself, wellness and well-being. We're referring them to counseling, and we're encouraging them to go talk to a counselor. We encourage them to make sure that they're eating healthy and having those conversations and having healthy relationships on campus. And so my question to you is, are you also practicing that in your own practices and thinking about, are we setting those examples for students? One of the conversations that we had in our office, we have student employees in our office, and we always talk about, we want to set great examples for our student employees, and some of them are former advisors, advisees. But are we setting good examples for them in what is a great self-care practice? Or are we eating lunch every day? Or are we skipping those meals? And our students are seeing that and watching that, but yet we're telling them, you should eat 3 healthy meals a day, right? But yet we're not doing it ourselves. And so think about the things that we are telling students and sharing with students, and ask yourself, am I also practicing what I preach? And am I also setting a great example for my students in doing so? And then I want you to think about, when do you self-care? What are those things that you do in the moment to take care of yourself, right? So things happen in the moment. So you might be in an advising appointment. And one thing I always do for myself is I always have my water bottle, because we talk a lot, right? And we need to be hydrated in order to be good advisors. And so I always have water. For me, that is a thing that is done in the moment, but also something that I do every day, all day, so that I am hydrated and feel refreshed. But those are things that I do in the moment. I also, in my office, I have a diffuser. I turn those, that is always on in my office. That is something that I do in the moment to have a refreshing environment in my office. I like scents and smells and things like that. And students normally come in, and it's a good conversation starter, and they'll come in and say, well, what's the scent today? Or what essential oil are you using today, right? But those are things that I do in the moment to take care of myself. And so what are those things that you do in the moment? What are those things that you tell yourself, so that if something happens or if you're triggered, you can fall back on those things that you do in the moment to take care of yourself? But also, what are the self-care practices that you incorporate on throughout your daily routine, right? What are those things? And what does that look like for you? And so for me, it does not matter what the day looks like. I don't care if I have back-to-back appointments. I will find time in my day to eat lunch. I'm going to eat lunch. I'm going to take that time to just sit down and have that time for myself. If I have back-to-back appointments, I will put a hold on my calendar. I typically have my lunchtime at around 12 to 1. And like today, after this session, I have my calendar blocked so I can have lunch. Just so that is some time that I can nourish my body, I can rejuvenate, I can take a break from the back-to-back appointments and meetings that I've had all day. But for me, that is a part of my daily routine. And that is something that I tell my office, if I'm at lunch, I am at lunch, right? And unless the building is burning down, give me my lunch, right? And I want to be able to do that for my staff as well. And so what are those daily practices that you can do or put into your routine? Maybe it's you take a brief walk outside just to get some fresh air a couple of times a week or on a daily basis. But what are those things for you? And then what are the self-care practices that you do monthly, quarterly, annually, right? What are those things? And for some of us, some of these things may not have been able to be done during COVID, but think about how you can reframe that. So for me, a practice that I had that was quarterly was to get a full body massage. That was one way that I would relax. I carry a lot of my stress and my shoulders and my back. And so that was one way to kind of help me. And I always got those at certain times of the academic year, because I knew we were going to come out of registration and I was going to need something to get me through the rest of the year. And so I had those at certain times of the academic year to help me kind of take care of myself in those ways. But what are those things that you do on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis that helps you create a practice of self-care? And then in order for you to create a self-care plan, because this is one thing I want you to take away from this session. So I know for a lot of us, we go to conferences and sessions, and we need to be able to bring something back to the campus to improve the campus. And what I want you to bring back to your campus is an actual self-care plan. And I want you to share your self-care plan with your staff and with folks in your office. So when you share out about, oh, this is what we learned at the conference, I want you to talk about self-care, and I want you to make it a priority. And I think the more we have these conversations on our campuses, the more we realize that this is a need and that it is a necessity, because self-care is not a luxury. It is a necessity in order for us to do our jobs well, right? So this is one takeaway. So a couple of steps here for creating your self-care plan. The first step here is to identify how you cope with stress, right? Because typically stress is what then triggers into those other areas that we were talking about. Stress is a huge part of the compassion fatigue and the COVID fatigue and the emotional labor. Stress is the underlying piece in terms of the burnout that we are experiencing. So identify how you actually cope with those stressors, right? And then ask yourself, are these healthy habits? Are the ways that I am coping with the stress, are they healthy habits? And then do they support your self-care? And if not, think about how you can shift those to healthy habits, and think about how they support your self-care, not only internally, but externally, right? So we want to think, and throughout this process, we want to think external and internal. Step 2, think about your maintenance plan. So you can think through those pieces and identify those stressors, but what does that actually look like, right? So we're going back to some of those considerations. What are the helpful things you can do on a regular basis that enable you to look after yourself and maintain a positive well-being? So again, what do you do on an annual basis? What do you do on a monthly basis, on a daily basis, for you to create a self-care practice? So that you are putting yourself at the forefront so that you are able to help other people. Think about this from a physical, emotional, social, and work perspective. So what are you doing? What are you doing physically? Are you taking a walk? Are you exercising? Do you do yoga? What are the emotional things that you are doing? Are you taking time to meditate? Are you taking time to breathe? Do you see a therapist? What are those things that you are doing to take care of yourself emotionally? And then socially, are you, are you talking with friends? Are you spending time with family? What are those things that you are doing socially? For me, social is really important. As you can probably tell, I'm an extrovert. I enjoy being around people. And COVID really took a hit for me in terms of not being around my friends. I haven't seen my family in a long amount of time. And so thinking about how I can do that. And so for me, getting with my best friends from college and having just laughter for hours at a time was a huge part of something that we did every year throughout at the end of the year, just to bring in the new year. And we missed that because we weren't together. And so I know those are things that I need to rejuvenate myself. And so we figured out a way to do it over Zoom, right? And we did had the same types of laughter and experiences, but it just wasn't in person. But think about what are those things you need socially in order for you to take care of yourself and to maintain positive well-being. And then think about your work environment, or what are the things that you need to do differently with work. Maybe you need to use, you need to use those vacation days, right? You need to use the vacation days. We all have vacation days. We need to use those vacation days. And those vacation days don't have to be a planned vacation to somewhere, right? It can be I need a mental health day. I need time away. I need time where I'm not checking my email, and commit yourself to doing that. So if you are taking a mental health day from work, do not log into your email. And maybe that means that I'm not getting notifications. Maybe that means that I'm intentionally making a decision not to connect my email to my phone. These are all things to think about, right? So for me, my email is connected to my phone, but I have made an intentional decision not to get notifications. So I will only check my email on my phone when I make the initiative to do it. I'm not getting an email or a notification every single time. That was something that I needed to do for my self-care. Because every time someone sent an email on the weekends, I would get the notification and I would naturally want to go read it. And I just realized I cannot do this anymore in order for me to maintain a peace of mind, right? And so ask yourself these questions and identify those areas and really write those down and think about how can I create a self-care practice with these areas? And then lastly, what's your self-care emergency plan? Again, what are those things that you do in the moment? What are the things that I can do to help me feel less stressed? And then the important piece here is who are the people that I can contact if I need to talk with someone, or if I need to vent, or if I need to kind of get some advice on how to manage and how to deal with these things, right? Or if I need to get some advice on how to on how I'm feeling after I have a student appointment that may have been heavy, right? Or you just may have had a long day of appointments, right? And you just need to just take a walk and want to walk and talk with someone. So who are the people, whether it is your work life or your family life or your social life, that you can contact to help support you with your self-care practice? And so those are 3 steps and about 10 or so questions that I think are important in thinking about creating a self-care plan. I hope this information was helpful for you. I also hope that you really think about what this means and why it is important for you to put your mask on first so that you can do your work well and to the capacity that you want to do it. And with that being said, I will open the floor for questions and any kind of conversation that you all would like to have.
Thank you so much. We do have a few questions coming in for you. So our first question is, how can we encourage our upper administration to create an environment in which we can do self-care? With caseloads of 2 times best practices, plus additional responsibilities, at a certain point, it becomes impossible to just say no, because the expectations is that everything is at the highest priority and needs to be done now. What can we do?
That is a great question. So here are some things that I would suggest. I think if you have, because I completely understand you have upper administration, and sometimes they're not necessarily as attentive to some of these topics and situations. A couple of things that we have actually done on our campus and that we're trying to be very intentional about. We have reached out to our staff council, especially in the midst of COVID. Prior to COVID and prior to some of these conversations, prior to the pandemic, we were already having larger conversations on campus about work-life balance, or what I call negotiation, because it's difficult to balance when you have a job where you're at 40, 50 hours a week, right? But we had already started having conversations, faculty and staff, about what does this look like? We tend to have a culture of busyness on campus, and everyone's a go-getter and everyone's trying to have the best practices in place and be innovative. And we just had to be really honest with ourselves and say, we're tired, right? And so what we needed to also think about, what is the best way to go about getting these types of conversations at a higher level. So folks start to reach out to our staff council. They have it can be anonymous. So if you may want to check and see if your staff council has anonymous ways to either get feedback, or if you feel comfortable, we knew a representative on the staff council to talk with confidentially. So kind of expressing those concerns. And they've been doing focus groups actually throughout this semester. They've been doing focus groups with different populations and different offices to get more feedback on what that looks like. We also have employee resource groups on campus. And so those employee resource groups have been very, very great communities for us to also elevate this conversation. So that way it's not just coming from one place or one person or one office, it's coming across campus from different types of employees. And so trying to have that conversation and how to elevate that conversation so that it gets to upper administration and talking about creating that environment. Something that I have personally done for myself is I talk about my self-care in my performance evaluation. So on your performance evaluation, there's questions. It's asking you about initiative. It's asking you about relationships. It's asking you about all these different competencies that we have to meet in our roles, right? So when I get to comments, additional comments, I normally will have, I will say something about, I've done all these things. I've listed all these things that I've done. I've talked about all the ways that I've met or exceeded my expectations. And in doing so, I also prioritize my self-care, and this is how I have done it. And so I always make a point to talk about that in my performance evaluation, so that I know, because these things are, one is going to my supervisor, two is typically going to, so we are housed in academic affairs, so we report to the provost office. So our associate provost is who our office reports to. They typically look at our performance evaluations, and this also goes to HR. And so when this information is filed, I want it to be known that in order for me to do all these things and to do this work well, I have to be able to take care of myself, and that it is important for me to know that the university recognizes that. And so that is an individual way that I go about doing that and making that known. Because I think that is important. I think it's difficult for us to have these expectations that we need to be doing all this work and creating these new initiatives and supporting all these programs and helping students, and not having some kind of support in terms of how we're able to take care of ourselves so that we can do that better. But also how we're able to take care of ourselves just because it's important to take care of ourselves, right? It's an important piece of what we need to do to survive and thrive as human beings. And so I think that's part of the things that I've done. I also think, you know, having some real conversations, because I'm reading back through the question about with caseloads of, I lost the question here.
It's talking about large caseloads.
Yeah, with the large caseloads, I think is really having some conversations about what that looks like. And so my prior institution was a large public institution, and there were folks that had caseloads that were 200, 300 per person, right? And literally on their calendar, the only times they didn't have appointments was from 8 to 9 in the morning and 4 to 5 in the afternoon, and they were appointments back to back. And I know that is life for a lot of us. And it was interesting when I came to Elon, since we're a smaller institution and since we do first year advising through our Elon 101 course, we only have about 15 students per section. And then the faculty advisors at the most, they might have around 50 advisees. So for me, it was interesting to hear when they said they had a large advising load. And I'm like, we only have 50 advisees, right? But I recognized that for them, that was a large load, and thinking about how we needed to do that. And so we started having some conversations about what does that look like in terms of how are we assisting students with declaring their majors from the first year, and then going into the major advisors. And then is there an equitable dispersion? So for offices that, you know, that have for campuses like mine that have a smaller amount, what we started to see is that there were some faculty that had much lower numbers than others. And we were trying to figure out, well, what was that about? So that was conversations that we were then sharing with deans, with department chairs, in terms of there's some issues here with the dispersion of how folks are being assigned advisees. That's a little bit easier when you have a model where it's a shared advising model, where you have faculty advisors and you have professional staff or staff that actually advise. I think for institutions that have large advising models, I think there has to be, for those of us who are hiring managers and those who are able to make decisions about new positions, we really have to think about what this does to our staff. When we have people who are advising 300 or so students, 200 to 300 students for an academic year, and how that is impacting their self-care, and are they really able to be effective, right? Not because they are not doing the job well, but just because of the sheer number of students that we are assigning to them. And if they're able to really get to know and build rapport with the students the way that they want to be able to do it. And so I think that lends to some larger conversations and some responsibility as folks like myself who are hiring managers and who are a part of some of those conversations in terms of talking about the need for having additional staff so that we can have a more equitable dispersion amongst folks. I completely get it though, in terms of, yeah, we have a large amount of students, we're a large public, so therefore we're gonna have larger numbers. But what makes sense? What's realistic? What how can we make sure that we are putting our advisors in a position to be able to be as effective as possible, right? And to support them, because that's a pretty heavy load to have 200 to 300, and thinking about what that is. But I also think it's important for us to actually share what we are experiencing for those of us who are in those positions. Really talk about how your day flows and how you're able to help students and what you'd like to be able to do more effectively, but also what that does for you and your well-being, and really talking about that and having those conversations. I think there are things that we all can assume about that, but until that is shared. So again, those performance evaluations, those one-on-ones with your supervisor on a weekly basis, reminding them of these things so that these conversations can be heightened.
So what do you do? What are your suggestions about dealing with the guilt? So you're at an institution where there's a huge caseload. For example, the student advisor ratio is 1 to 1,600. So advisors have appointments, again, back to back all day. And you want to take this time for self-care, but you feel guilty that if I don't answer Branda's email, Branda's not going to graduate and get that great job and have this wonderful life.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that, manage self-care, and be effective?
Yeah, I think some of those pieces that I was talking about with self-care, some of those things are, again, how you manage your time and how you manage your responsibilities, right? So like I was saying, I purposely don't get notifications on my email. I recognize everyone can't do that. But I think asking yourself, I can respond to Brenda, or if you said Barbara, I can respond to Barbara. But if I take 15 minutes to take a break or 15 minutes to take a walk to get some fresh air, is that going to be detrimental to Barbara if I give myself that 15 minutes, right? Because some of that is, oh, let me just get it done. Let me just go ahead and respond to her. And then next thing you know, you responded to 15 emails, right? Because you've gotten into this rhythm and you still haven't eaten lunch. You still haven't gotten up from your desk to stretch or to breathe or to give your body some relief from sitting for the last how many ever hours you've been sitting, right? Because we're just so focused on getting the work done. And so, like I was saying during the presentation, I know that can be difficult to think about how we can put ourselves first. But I also thinking about what is it, how can we make that shift? Because I guarantee you, if you give yourself that 15 minutes or that 5 minutes to just do a breathing exercise, you're gonna feel better and you're gonna be more effective in your job. I mean, I know very early on in my career, there would be days where I literally would go all day and not have just stopped to take a break to breathe. And then on my drive home, I would literally feel my body, my day catching up with me. Like I literally would feel my day catching up with me. And then by the time I would get home, I'd be so tired. I'd be talking to my son, trying to do his homework. And I'm like, I'm drained. And that was because I just did not take the time throughout the day, one, to manage my calendar in a different way, to think about, let me put some holds here. And so these are things that I do now at work. I will put holds on my calendar in spaces. So if I look at my calendar normally on Sunday or on Monday morning, I will look at my calendar for the week. And if I see that I have back-to-back appointments, I will go in and put in time for holds. So that way I can just get a mental break or get time to use the restroom or to walk downstairs and to refill my water bottle or to breathe. Because other folks have access to my calendar, our student employees, our program assistant. And sometimes they will fit you in, they will fit an appointment in, right? In the smallest window of time. and you're like, wait a minute, I've had appointments all day. And so I do those things, but I do those things for myself because I know if I don't, I'm not going to make it to 3 o'clock. I'm going to be drained by 3 o'clock. And so I think that that's important, is trying to rid yourself of that guilt, knowing that it is okay for you to put yourself first so that you can be able to do those things. And knowing that waiting that 15 minutes or, waiting an extra 30 minutes or an hour to respond to the student probably will not be detrimental unless they're trying to meet a deadline right at 5 o'clock and they email you at 4:30. That's a whole other conversation to have too about waiting to the last minute, right? But students, we know that students do that. But I do think, giving yourself some grace giving yourself that time and giving yourself that space to be able to take care of yourself and do that.
Thank you. There is one more question in the chat. And actually it's about, you talked earlier about essential oils.
Uh-huh.
Can you talk a bit more about that and about creating, you know, a space for self-care, say in your office or in your Zoom room?
Yeah, so I think, so for me, I love candles. I love diffusers. I love scents and things like that in my space. But for most of us, we can't have candles in our office on campus. But diffusers are allowed. And so I'm always cognizant of making sure that I have, I try to have scents that are more neutral, because I do know that there is like sensitivity to certain scents for some students, especially if they have allergies or if they have certain conditions. And so I try to have scents that are a little more neutral and scents that are known to be relaxing and that are more natural. For me, that is very helpful because it helps me set the environment, it helps me kind of set my space in terms of just being in the space and kind of what I need for me, but also I've noticed that my students enjoy it too. Like I said, it's a conversation starter. They're like, so what scent do you have today? Or what do you have today? But I also think for me is also the background noise. So sometimes you just need some sounds to help you focus. Some people like to have music playing in the background, maybe in their office, and some folks, they might have a white noise machine. So a part of our unit is disabilities resources, so they tend to have white noise machines around. My diffusers are water-based, so I can typically hear the water. And so I don't like a lot of distraction whenever I'm trying to focus on a project or doing work, but that helps keep me kind of focused. And so those are just things that I enjoy about my space. Some of my coworkers, they have pictures of their animals, they have flowers. You know, I think those are moments of self-care, right? Those are things like, what are those things that you need to help you feel comfortable and relaxed in your space so that you're able to do your job? Because one of the things that I say is we spend a lot of time at work, right? I mean, for the most part, we're at work at least 40 hours a week, some of us 40, maybe even 60 hours a week. And so if I'm going to be there most of the day, if I can't be this is the one time in my entire career I've been able to work from home, right? But I want to, and the things I have at home are things that I enjoy, things that I love having in my space. And so I want to have a similar space at work, since I spend a lot of time there every single day. And I also want my students to feel like they're coming into a space that is welcoming, but also comfortable and relaxing to them. Because a lot of times they come in, they're stressed, they're triggered, there's things that are happening that they want to share, they're anxious. You know, I had 8 advising appointments yesterday, and the anxiety around getting the classes that I want. And, you know, I always say, you're going to get what you need, might not get what you want, but you're going to get what you need. But the anxiety around that and thinking about what the fall semester is going to look like. And so being able to sit in my office, of course, virtually, that's not the possibility, but when they're in my office and my diffuser is going and there's lavender in the background, it helps calm you. It helps relieve some of that stress naturally. And so I hope that helps them as well, as much as it helps me.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to read a comment from Cynthia, which says, hi, will this recording be shared after the summit? Great session.
Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate it. I hope it will be. I think it was recorded, so I hope it will be shared.
Yes, it's recorded. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your presentation on self-care. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And I see there's other questions. If anyone wants to reach out, here's my contact information. Feel free. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have that we didn't have time to get to.
Well, thank you. Well, we are coming to the end. Good afternoon again. What a wonderful 2 days. On behalf of the Advising Summit Committee, Victoria and I would like to once again thank our speakers, Adam Johnsick and Brandy Prost. We are extremely grateful that you joined us today. You both were amazing. Thank you for emphasizing the importance of self-care, and we will remember to put our mask on first. Thank you to our sponsor, Complete College America, and specifically to our liaison, Nicholas Hewitt. We are appreciative of your time, the time you took, and your support for making this summit possible. Thank you to Dr. Lucinda Zoe, Senior University Dean and Vice Provost for Academic Programs and Policies for CUNY. We are grateful for your guidance and your ongoing support of our council and its members. We have to give a tremendous thank you to Dr. Mari Watanabe, Director of Undergraduate Education Initiatives and Research at CUNY. We are very grateful for all of your assistance with putting this event together. We truly could not have done it without you. Thank you.
Yes. And just to continue with our thank yous, you know, in our new normal, it's definitely have brought with it an incredible need of technology, right? And an appreciation for those with the technology skills to bring it all together. So this summit certainly would not have been possible without the support of CUNY Central, right? And in particular, the folks in IT. So thank you, right? To Mike Muller, John Jenna, and the crew for your assistance. We truly thank you for your support over the last 2 days and even prior to, just to get us prepared to this very day. Thank you to the entire Summit Planning Committee. Woohoo, we made it, right? We're here. Thank you so much for all of your support. Just to name a few, right? For our members, Vanessa Gonzalez Figueroa, Michael Verdino, Melody Robles, Kate McPherson, Jesus Perez, Catherine Munet, Marina Parakovic, right? Crystal Liriano Gonzalez, Lisa Morlem, Kenny Bell Peña, Christine Orbetta, and also Alana Burke. So thank you. Sharon and I can't thank you enough. We thank you for your flexibility, for your creativity, for the time dedicated to make this happen. So thank you so much. Thank you again to all of the presenters. Again, your involvement helped to make this summit what it is, right? And a success, and what our students would say and what they would call lit. Thanks for making it lit. And to the attendees, thank you all for your participation and engagement throughout this event, especially the advisors. All of you are extremely talented, hardworking, and at the core, right, of our students and student success and everything that we do. Through all of the challenges we face, especially during this pandemic, your dedication has not gone unnoticed. So to highlight this, we put a call out to all CUNY students and asked that they share comments regarding their advising experience. As a result, our partners at Complete College America helped to facilitate the creation of a video montage for your viewing. Enjoy.
Hi Irene, it's Ariane Lopez here. I wanted to say thank you so much for all the help that you have provided me with throughout my studies here at SLU, for helping me to become involved with the student union, for your encouragement, your support. Honestly, I really don't know if I would have been able.
Hey Annie Garcia, it's Jared. I just want to thank you for being such a great ASAP advisor, and I missed our in-person meetings and talks. And I just want to thank you for helping me through my journey through PNPC.
3 qualities that I admire most about Miss Annie Garcia. She's professional, she's authentic, and she's relatable. Continue to be the very helpful person that you are, Miss Garcia. I truly appreciate you.
I love her company and I love the opportunities that she's given me, and I just thought it was important for me to acknowledge that. So Kyoko, thank you so much for seeing something in me and giving me opportunities. I appreciate you.
I would like to take this moment to give a huge thank you and shout out to Nancy Cintron, for being an exemplary and consistently exemplary advisor, always willing to understand, always willing to help you out. So thank you, and I wish you the best.
Take a moment to thank my advisor, Hyman. Hyman, without you, I would not be able to finish in May, this coming May. You've pushed me beyond my limits in spite of all that I was going through, and I can't thank you enough. I sincerely thank you from the bottom of my heart. I myself am very grateful, and I'm quite sure all the other students that follow me that will receive you as an advisor will also be very thankful. So thank you, and thank you again.
Today, I would love to express my gratitude to Mariani, who has been an amazing advisor that I couldn't find in my college life. Thank you so much for always have the right words for me and always push me to do new things every day. And the most important thing, you bring back my confidence. Thank you so much. I will always be grateful for that. And it's my pleasure today to celebrate all your hard work as an advisor.
The most selfish thing you can do in this world is help someone else. Why is it selfish? Because the gratification, the goodness that comes to you, the good feeling that I get from helping others, nothing's better than that. Well, one or two things, but nothing's better than that. Not jewelry, not big house I have, not the cars, but it's the joy. That's where the joy is, in helping others. That's where the success is, in helping others.
I'm a little sad that I'm not going to have her anymore after I graduate in the fall. It's time to be a big girl and continue my education. Thank you, Ebony. I appreciate you a lot, and God bless you.
I was trying to hold the tears back. We talked about weeping. Well, at least Dr. Charlie Nutt did, and Dr. Lucinda Zoe yesterday. But again, we just can't thank you enough for all that you do every day. And again, just being selfless, selfish, and just helping. So again, if anything that you take away from this is that you all are amazing people. I'm so grateful to be a part of this CUNY community and to be a part of this field alongside you. So thank you. This is the conclusion of our program. And again, thank you all for your contributions to the field. I would certainly say to look out for an email following today's program where you will receive information about completing an evaluation. We do appreciate your feedback, and we talk about right data and how important it is in the work that we do day to day with our students, but also for the purpose of our council. It's extremely important for us to gather that info so that we can provide you on an annual basis a very quality summit. So please look out for that and do respond. And we hope again that you appreciate the experience and look forward to you joining us next year.